Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I am your personal robot Mr. Observant. Taliban has become prominent in 1994 after withdrawal of Soviet troops from Afghanistan. By 1998 Taliban were in 90% control of Afghanistan. September 2001, Al-Qaeda operatives hijacked commercial airliners, crashing them into World Trade Center in New York. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. US ex-President Bush signs a joint resolution authorizing the use of force against those responsible for attacking the United States on 9/11. October 2001, US military with British support begins bombing campaign on Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was killed at his home by US military in May 2011. In February 2020, after 9 years of continuous confrontations, US signed a peace deal agreement with Taliban. Biden decides on complete US military withdrawal by 9/11/2021. Biden says Washington will continue to assist Afghan security forces and support the peace process. President Ashraf Ghani fled abroad, leaving the government in collapse. US-led military operation began to airlift Western diplomats, civilians and Afghans. Taliban fighters on the 16th of August took over the Afghan capital. Demoralized Afghan security forces offered no resistance as the insurgents seized most of the country in just over a week. India airlifted 392 persons from Kabul in an operation that covered Indian citizens as well as Afghan nationals, including Sikhs and Hindus. The Taliban officials said that they are planning to form a new government structure which will not be a democracy by Western definitions, but it will protect everyone's rights. They will be having separate teams to take care of their internal security and financial issues. Experts from the former government will be brought in for crisis management. Talibans are stating they want peace, they will not take revenge against old enemies and will respect the rights of women within the framework of Islamic law. Former Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani's brother Hashmat Ghani Ahmadzai has announced his support to Talibans in the presence of Taliban leader Khalilur Rahman and religious scholar Mufti Mahmood. Co-education is called as root of all evils in the society by Taliban. The first fatwa issued by Taliban's spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid is to ban co-education in all private and government universities. He also said that female lecturers would be allowed to teach only female students but not the male ones. Indians were stopped and taken to an unknown location near the Kabul airport for questioning and verification of travel documents by Taliban fighters, and later they were released without any harm. Germany evacuated nearly 2,000 people from Kabul airport. So guys, hope you have liked this short history, walking back in time on Taliban movement. Your Mr. Observant has chosen these 3 best YouTubers, sharing recent happenings on Taliban movement.
حرکات داخل رکشا شیشته بودن، از کورس می رفتن طرف خانهشان. قسم چبلی پای ما در پایشون چبلی بوده، او را از رکشا پایین کردن، لطکوب کردن همراه کیبل که چرا قسم چبلی می پوشه که جوانا را خراب بکنی.
خزو حقوق ته د شریعت په چوکاټ کې پابند اوسېږي. زموږ د خواندو مندو هغه حقوق چې الله جل جلاله په شریعت کې ورکړي دي او زموږ د ملت ارزښتونه ایجابوي هغه ټول ورکو. ښځه د ټولنې مهم عنصر او برخه ده. ښځې به د هېواد په بېلابېلو برخو کې فعالیت لري او په د چوکاټو د اصولو په دننه کې به کار کولی شي. په طبي، تعلیمي او مختلفو برخو کې اړتیا ورته لرو. زموږ ټولنې اړتیا حس کوي دوی به زموږ سره حضور ولري او فعالیت به
طالبان که من خیلی طفل بودم، مادرم مرا برده بود آیسکریم خانه و مادرم به خاطر از اینکه به چند لحظه روی خود مادرم لچ کرده بود، طالبا به شلاق می زدن که خود چرا روی تلوچ کردی. و او حس بیچارگی و او حس حقارتی را که من در روز زمان داشتم، گرچه خیلی خرد بودم، طفل بودم، فراموش نمیکنم. و امروز هم احساس میکنم اگر طالبان بیاید ما با اونمو دوره سیاه طالبانی شاید بر بگردیم.
دندمې په آرډي یا د افغانستان ملي راډیو ټلویزیون کې وه چې هلته هم د خبر څانګې ویادوم. ما نن وغوښتل چې د کله چې نظام بدل سو، ما وغوښتل چې خپلې دندې ته ولاړه سم. همدا خپل شهامت مې لاسه ورنه کړ، خو له بده مرغه چې ما ته اجازه رانه کړل شوه، سربیره پر دې چې ما کارت هم درلود. هغه نارینه کارکوونکي زموږ چې وو، هغوی د کارت په لرلو سره هغوی په دې باندې بریالي شول چې دفتر ته لاړ شي. خو ما ته یې ګواښ وکړ چې تاسو نشئ کولی خپلې دندې ته دوام ورکړئ ځکه چې نظام بدلون کړی دی. نو دلته ستر ګواښونه دي زموږ پر وړاندې، که نړیوال زما غږ اوري، مرستندوی یا بنسټونه زما غږ اوري، د موږ سره دې مرسته وکړي ځکه چې زموږ ژوند
What is the future of India's project in Afghanistan? Should we be pro-Taliban like China, Pakistan, Russia, as 85% of the area is under the Taliban now? Or should we still support Ashraf Ghani's government like the US? See, the Chinese want to make Afghanistan part of their sphere of influence, right? The Chinese are very interested in continually expanding their sphere of influence, and Afghanistan is a beautiful opportunity for them to do that. And therefore they're partnering with the Taliban. They also want to extract various minerals and resources from Afghanistan. So that's the reason why they are partnering with the Taliban. The Chinese want to use Afghanistan as their strategic backyard. It will give them strategic depth. In a future war, in an imaginary future war with India or Kashmir, they would like to use Afghanistan as a recruiting ground for terrorists and cannon fodder, people who are expendable and who can be used as cannon fodder in a war with India. So that is the reason why the Pakistanis are very much interested in Afghanistan. The Taliban is a Pakistani creation. The terrorist Talibanis are Pakistanis. Even many of them are Afghans, but it is all administered from Pakistan. The bosses are in Pakistan, right? So the Taliban is a creature of Pakistan. So that's why the Pakistanis are supporting the Taliban. Russia also wants to expand its sphere of influence. If you recall, in the late 70s, early 80s, they invaded Afghanistan, and that did not work out very well, but they have always been interested in Afghanistan and in having some influence in Afghanistan as well.
Hello and welcome to the 538 Politics Podcast. I'm Galen Druk. After nearly 20 years of war, the Taliban has returned to power in Afghanistan far more quickly and thoroughly than the Biden administration expected when it announced plans to withdraw U.S. troops from the country. New reports over the weekend showed scenes of chaos and desperation as thousands of people tried to flee the country. Today, we're going to take a look at what Americans thought of the war in Afghanistan and the Biden administration's withdrawal plan. Also, last week, we got once-in-a-decade data about who Americans are and where they live. The Census Bureau released the demographic and geographic information from its 2020 count, which we're going to dig into. Over the past decade, the country has grown significantly more racially and ethnically diverse and concentrated around metropolitan areas. In fact, a majority of U.S. counties lost population since 2010, with growth in metropolitan areas making up virtually all of the country's population gains. So here with me to discuss all that today are managing editor Micah Cohen. Hello, Micah.
Hello.
Also here with us is politics editor Sarah Frostenson. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Galen.
And elections analyst Jeffrey Skelly. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Galen.
So let's begin with public opinion on the war in Afghanistan and the Biden administration's approach. And I should say, President Biden is expected to speak later this afternoon, which will have likely happened by the time that folks are listening to this, but has not happened yet at the time that we're recording. So this was America's longest war, which began after the September 11th attacks and was largely seen as more justified than the war in Iraq. Gallup's polling showed that the majority of Americans did not view the war as a mistake as recently as 2019. However, by 2008, Americans were overwhelmingly telling pollsters that the war was not going well. So I want to begin by talking about where we are now. Of course, it's going to be some time, some days, some weeks before we get polling on how Americans are reacting to the weekend's events. But at least in the run-up to this, how many Americans supported continuing the war in Afghanistan versus withdrawing troops? Jeff?
When you present it as sort of a black and white question, do you support Biden's decision to withdraw troops or to end the U.S. military presence, or however the wording was, you generally find Americans were quite supportive, much more supportive of withdrawing. In some polls, you had as high as 70% of Americans or registered voters, depending on the poll again. So on the whole, I think if you look at it that way, Americans were ready to get out of Afghanistan. They were supportive of the idea. But it's not quite that simple. Some other polling asked a version of this question where the pollster might have asked, would you want to remove all American forces, or would you like to leave a few American forces there to help the Afghan government fight terrorism, or wording of that sort? And in those cases, at least in a couple instances, you had a plurality of Americans who preferred leaving a few troops behind. So I do think it's a little complicated in that sense.
It's interesting, too, that support for the war back in 2001 when we initially entered was quite high. Polls at the time, particularly from Gallup, were finding 85 to 90% of Americans supported that war. But as you said at the outset here, Galen, this is a war that has lasted 20 years. It's ebbed and flowed in terms of where it has stood in the American consciousness about, our thoughts on Afghanistan and thinking about that we're still there. And so as Jeffrey was getting at, I think there has been a big shift in terms of the number of Americans who said, okay, I support Biden's, decision to remove troops from Afghanistan. I think the issue here, and we'll see what new polls show, this week, is that no one anticipated the extent to which and the speed that democracy and the government there in Afghanistan would collapse.
Okay guys. That's it for today, hoping to see you soon in my next RoboCast. Please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to press bell icon. Bye for now.